Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa Karasek, and I am the Brave Healer Productions Community Manager, and I'm the moderator for Brave Storytime. Today, I'm here with fellow author Amy Lindner-Lesser, reading her chapter today from The Grief Experience. We're very excited for this chapter. And this one is going to be a little different than you're used to with the other Brave Story Times. I want to give everyone right now a heads up. Pause the video. You live streamers, go grab real quick. Amy and I want you to really quickly go grab your journal, piece of paper, notepad, your something real quick, a couple pieces of paper. We're going to have you do some writing. So grab your favorite pen or colors or markers, whatever it is that you write with, your favorite utensil to write with. Grab some paper or a journal. After Amy reads her chapter, her tool or tools are some writing prompts, journaling prompts. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite you to grab those tools now, your pad and pencil, pen. And then if you're watching the live stream, or I'm sorry, if you're watching the replay or the YouTube video later, we just ask that when it's at that point, all you have to do is pause the video and complete the exercise and then move on. But we'll leave it up to you to pause, and we'll remind you again later when we're at that point in the chapter. Sound good, Amy? Anything else you want to add?
That's perfect. Just to sit back and listen.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Your chapter is so amazing. So, Amy, I have a couple questions for you before you read,
Sure.
if you don't mind. Tell us how you came to be in this book.
I believe in doing things that challenge you and that are difficult. When my gut starts to feel nervous and what I want to do is say, no, 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 I say, okay, Amy, now you need to do this. So I was looking through some kind of, it was a networking thing. And I found Kelly Dougherty's information and saw that she was a grief social worker and therapist, and that her practice was close to where I live. And I was new to the area. And so I said, okay, I'm going to reach out and see if she wants to do coffee and meet her. And so I reached out, we set up a time, and I went to her office and we started talking, and she mentioned the book to me. And I jumped at the opportunity to be able to be in the book and to be able to tell one of my grief stories.
That in itself is a wonderful story. Good for you. Good for you for getting out of the comfort zone.
We can't grow if we don't move.
Exactly. So why did you want to write this chapter? I think you just led into it a little bit, but if you don't mind, can you expand on that a little? This chapter in particular.
I've had a lot of losses in my life, more than what the average number is. And, I lost my husband, I lost my father, my mother and stepfather, a stepsister, a bunch of other people. But the death that really hit me the hardest was the death of my best friend of 44 years. I knew her before I met my husband and knew her through my husband's passing, actually my father's passing, which was a lot earlier. And she got me through Steve's death. She got me through my mother, my stepfather. And that death of her really hit me. And I talk a little bit about why I became a grief coach also in the story.
Wonderful. So I think we might need to grab some Kleenex too, everyone.
I try to keep some humor in things,
Okay.
because life is too tough if all you do is cry. So there's definitely humor. And it's also, I think, very important for people to realize that you can hold two emotions at the same time. You can be sad and happy. You can laugh and cry.
Mm-hmm.
So feel free to laugh too.
Okay, I love that. Thank you. You give us permission.
I do. You don't need it.
Well, I think that is hard for some people, actually, but we'll talk about that later. So again, I think you led into my next question, but how did it feel writing your chapter, knowing that you were sharing it with the world and that people you don't even know are going to read this?
I think that I was hopeful that my experience might be able to help somebody else. Somebody could identify with what I went through and maybe grow and heal a little from that. Certainly, every loss is different. Everybody's grief is different. The tool that I do at the end can be used, though, for any type of loss. That whenever we have the change or the loss of any kind of a relationship, whether it's with a human, an animal, or even a thing, like your first car possibly, or a career, that when that relationship changes, grief is a normal response. And we don't, in our society, we don't process grief very well. We don't give people permission to feel the difficult feelings. And so here's my story is only one of 25 that hopefully will give the reader permission to feel and to move through it. Because there's one thing that I've learned is if we don't process and we don't deal with those emotions, they come back in some really ugly ways.
I have to agree. Okay, Amy, then if you haven't, grab your journal, piece of paper, a couple pieces of paper, grab your pen, maybe a couple of pens, I don't know, have backups. And remember, Amy's going to read her chapter, and at some point while she's reading, she's going to take some pauses and give you some journaling prompts. And we just ask if you're watching the replay or the video to just pause at those points and complete the exercises and then unpause and come back. We have more than one prompt. So Amy has more than one prompt. I can't take credit for that. Let me give that all back to you, Amy. So Amy is going to give you quite a few prompts, and we want to make sure you get them all. So you might also want to, consider the time it's going to take you to watch the video. Make sure you give yourself enough space and time to watch this video. Okay, Amy, so with that said, are you feeling ready? Are you ready?
I am ready. I just want to clarify one thing, that
Okay.
it feels more comfortable for you to pause, to just write down the prompt and then come back to the exercises later on when you have a clear head and more space and don't feel rushed. That works too.
Perfect. Perfect. And we can see the book there right behind her over there, The Grief Experience. But Amy, if you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. So, this is my chapter, The Alchemy of Grief, Discovering the Silver Linings in a Loved One's Death. Every experience, no matter how bad it seems, holds within it a blessing of some kind. The goal is to find it. Buddha. We met on the first day of graduate school. I was starting at the School of Social Work and Social Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. I was minding my own business as I walked on the sidewalk in front of the school building. That's when I saw her sprawled out on the ground. I ran over and immediately bent down, offered her a hand, and helped her up. That was the beginning of a friendship that lasted 44 years. And although she was ill and disabled for quite a few years at the end, I never thought I'd get that call. Liz, as I soon learned was her name, tripped on a patch of uneven sidewalk. I rescued her, and for the next 44 years, we were best friends. There was scarcely an evening that went by that we didn't share our feelings, thoughts, laughter, and tears. We shared stories of our work. I tutored her in statistics, to ensure she'd pass and graduate. We shared heartaches, family stories, and relationship breakups. We drove from Philadelphia to Ohio together for another friend's wedding. Liz was one of a small handful of guests who attended my wedding. We shopped together for my dress. And when my late husband, Steve, and I decided to adopt our daughters, Liz was not only one of our character references, but she also became godmother to our two children. She was their Aunt Liz and took them on roller coaster rides when I refused. Even when my family and I moved from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts, our friendship survived. We visit each other for concerts, birthdays, and holidays. Her parents were some of the first guests at my inn and came for Thanksgiving the year after my husband died, when my mother was in Florida. We were as close as sisters. Liz accompanied me to visit my daughters at sleepaway camp the weekend before Steve died and every year after. We always stopped at her old camp on the way home. She even helped me redo flowers for my older daughter's wedding that the florist messed up. I remember speaking with her one morning as she drove to work. I was on my way to a massage. We were chatting when suddenly the call dropped. In and of itself, that wasn't unusual. Cell reception in the Berkshires wasn't great. I waited to call her back after my massage. No answer. I'm not worried. Since this isn't unusual, our calls drop all the time, I thought. I called her at work, an adult day treatment program where she was the director. Her assistant answered and told me someone crossed the median and hit her head on. She was pulled out of her car with the jaws of life and is in the trauma center in South Jersey. After months of treatment, hospitals, and rehab centers, Liz was discharged. She couldn't walk and wouldn't be able to remain in her home or even go back to work or drive. One of her brothers brought a house near him in Maryland and renovated it so she could live on one floor using her wheelchair. And down to Maryland she moved. A few years later, Liz fell in her bathroom and fractured her femur. It was hours before anyone realized and got help to her. She spent months in rehab, and then COVID-19 hit. Alone with no visitors allowed and the new complication of needing dialysis, Liz decided to return home with 24-hour help. Over the next year or so, Liz volunteered with a local hospice and a homeless shelter. She had home dialysis and made a life, although much smaller than before. She began asking me to take some of her things when I visited. I knew she was preparing for her inevitable death, and I couldn't bear the thought that she wouldn't be around forever and kept putting it off. She turned 70 in April of 2022. I asked her sister-in-law to pull together a dinner party to celebrate the milestone. Liz didn't want a party. She didn't want to celebrate. And I remember saying, Liz, you only turned 70 once. That's a reason to celebrate. And I thought, this may be your last birthday. I want you to know how much you are loved by so many people. I want you to see it too. My last visit with her was at the end of July 2022. I was on my way to Virginia to help my daughter, who was about to give birth to her second child. I spent about 4 days with Liz in the hospital in a dull room with poor lighting and a view of a tar-covered gravel roof with a smokestack in the middle. She looked at me and in her Liz way said, go on Amazon, order some kind of decoration to make that view better. I wish I had taken her request seriously. She might have enjoyed looking out at the roof more. She was lucid most of the time, but in lots of pain and not eating or drinking. We reminisced, and I told her how much she meant to my children and to me. I said, you're an amazing human being, best friend. I love you, and I'm so grateful you're in my life. I stopped back at the hospital to see her a week later and spent 2 days with her. Things were looking worse. She was mostly incoherent when I left. A little less than 2 weeks later, just 5 days after my birthday, my phone rang. It was her sister. Liz passed this morning. She died on her own terms. I was numb. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't. The ambulance was on its way to bring her home, but she didn't make it. She said her goodbyes to the family, her two brothers, sister, nieces, and nephew the night before, and made her exit quietly from this world. I stood at her graveside at the cemetery in New Jersey on a hot Friday in August, listening to her niece give a eulogy. She said, "Liz never met a stranger. She was a friend to everyone, from the homeless person on the corner to the best dressed person at the country club." A few weeks later, at her memorial service in Maryland, I made a promise to myself and to her that I'd figure out a way to honor her. Standing there at her brother's home on the water, I decided to pull all of my experiences, personal and professional, and stitch them together into a legacy. Recently, one of my friends called me the Queen of Silver Linings. I needed to think about that label for a few minutes, unsure if it was a moniker I wanted to own. With all the life quakes, life transitions on steroids I've experienced in my life, I decided it was a huge compliment and I liked the title. As I have long known, grief doesn't only happen after the death of a family member or spouse. We can grieve over the loss of an identity, loss of health or mobility, loss of a close friendship, and unfortunately, so much more. My life has been filled with so much joy and love, and with that naturally comes sadness. It's all part of the journey. Over the last 60 years, I've lost 14 of my closest family members to death, including my husband, father, mother, all my grandparents, my stepfather, and then another 18 deaths of people who weren't quite as close. The 30 plus include only human deaths, not the pets and other life quakes, such as moves, infertility, diabetes, job changes that I've navigated, which also cause grief. Yet it was Liz's death that hit me the hardest. I had a choice to either start to feel sorry for myself and be very miserable, or look at it in a new way. Instead of seeing things as happening to me, I began to see how things were happening for me. It's a mindset shift that's not always the easiest to do, but it's more positive and productive. So I started to think about what I was supposed to learn from each of those life quakes. What were my lessons and my takeaways from them? I started to see life in a different way. I began to feel grateful, not for the entire experience, but for parts of each, the parts that made me grow and become a better person. I realized that each life quake comes with a lesson or silver lining if we allow ourselves the time, the space, and permission to keep examining it. I understand it isn't easy to think about silver linings when you're in the early stages of grief. Heck, we don't even always realize or identify that the emotion we're feeling is grief. What I do know is that as we're navigating through our grief, there's often a point when we're ready to acknowledge it and see there is life after grief. We realize that while our life will never be the same as it was pre-quake, we'll go on and possibly even find a more enriching life. We become ready to find the silver lining, the gift, or lesson that we can embrace to help us understand and give meaning to the life quake and help us move through and forward. Here are some of the other life quakes I experienced and what I can now identify as silver linings. I hope they'll help you to begin to realize them in your life. With each death, I learned that nothing and no one was permanent, and without knowing, began to live my life in the moment. When President John F. Kennedy was assassinated, his daughter Caroline and I were about the same age. I watched how she and John Jr. behaved. I remember feeling compassionate. The experience normalized death for me, seeing I was not alone. When my great-grandmother died, I learned the importance of family, play, laughter, and storytelling. 10 months after my wedding, my father died. He was my biggest cheerleader, my source of strength, and believed I could do anything I set my mind to, which gave me the conviction that I could. 42 years later, I'm still working on being my own cheerleader, something I don't know if I would have done if he were still alive. After a year of fertility treatments and lots of soul searching, we became parents through international adoptions. Each of our daughters' adoptions, 3.5 years apart, took 5 weeks of time away from our home, family, friends, and work. I wouldn't change our experiences for anything. We got to spend our daughter's first weeks of life in Mexico and experience the country as natives. We deepened our connection to the land of our children's heritage. My Spanish became almost fluent. We met and became close friends with the family there, who became our extended family. And most importantly, we were able to add 2 bright, caring, funny, wonder-filled, and amazing daughters to our family. When they were 11 and 8 years old, my husband and I decided to move and pursue new careers as innkeepers, using money my husband inherited from his mother. We moved from Pennsylvania to Massachusetts and lost contact with many of our close friends in the community where we were very involved. I didn't realize at the time how difficult this would be or how much I'd grieve, since I was excited by our new opportunity. The recent diagnoses of melanoma, skin cancer for my husband, and diabetes for me further complicated the move and my grief. A mere 2.5 years later, I became a widow when Steve's cancer returned and attacked his liver and brain. I was still trying to settle into a new community. Not only did I have to grieve the loss of my husband, but I was forced to assume new roles of single parent and solo entrepreneur, roles I never wanted. I learned not to take anything for granted and not to put off doing something until the time felt right. For the first time in my life, I became independent and learned to live alone, other than caring for my children, who were 11 and 14 at the time of Steve's death, and thought they were quite mature and independent. Even though I was an only child, I was always surrounded by friends. I began to enjoy my own company and the power of setting boundaries around my energy, desire to be alone, and ability to say no to doing things I didn't want to do. I wasn't there yet, but I was taking baby steps toward no longer being a people pleaser. I also found a spiritual home at that time. In the following 15 years, I cared for the inn, my children, and then my aging mother and stepfather. When my mother and stepfather died less than 3 months apart, I felt lost without my role as a caregiver. 6 months later, I became an empty nester when my younger daughter got married. My next life quake came during COVID. I was struggling to keep a business going while the world was mostly shut down for travel and tourism. I was committed to continuing the employment of my 2 very dedicated staff members. One day, right before Christmas in 2020, my doorbell rang. On the porch stood a man I recognized as a local realtor, who asked me if I was interested in selling the inn. My immediate response to him was, no. And then a voice in the back of my head said, Amy, don't be a fool. Every business is for sale if the price is right. So I told him I wasn't looking to sell, but as I knew, every business could be for sale, and I'd be happy to meet with his buyers. They came after Christmas, and by March 30th, the inn had new owners, and I moved from the Berkshires to Saratoga County, New York. The sale of the inn was neither inherently good or bad. Every way you look at it, though, I was grieving its loss. I missed my assistant, the guests, the town that was my home for 25 years, the culture, and my friends. I missed the busyness of the inn, the people, and performing weddings. I loved my new home, and yet I was lost and lonely. I knew very few people, my daughter, son-in-law, and his parents. The world was still mostly shut down, so there weren't opportunities to meet people in person. Then the proverbial shit hit the fan. My best friend died. It's the story at the beginning of this chapter. I felt completely alone. No parents, husband, or BFF. My daughters were busy with their own families and young children. The grief felt unbearable for a while. And then I decided I wanted to be happy and focused on joy. I was no longer content with surviving. I wanted to thrive. I learned to be resourceful and joined online groups, took professional development and self-improvement courses, attended Zoom calls, and attempted to start a coaching business for innkeepers. I kept busy, but I was lonely and still grieving my former life. I pushed myself out of my comfort zone and took on challenges, and I began to grow. I joined a few meetup groups, made new friends, and decided to turn the lessons I learned from my grief into a living legacy to my friend Liv and my husband Steve. You too can find silver linings in your own life quakes when you're ready. They always say time changes things, but you actually have to change them yourself. Andy Warhol. And now we're ready for the tool. So grab your paper, your writing utensil, and here, let me just read a little bit of the introduction, and we're off. The first step is to allow yourself to feel all your feelings. Grief is normal, natural, and healthy. It's also painful and messy. Unfortunately, you have to go through it or it will just rear up again, possibly stronger and in sneaky ways like anger or addiction. After you've taken the time to feel all the feelings, started on the work to settle any legal and financial matters, believe me, I know how tough this is, and are feeling like you're ready to move forward with your life, take some time to answer these prompts. First prompt: describe the life quake you're in the midst of or have experienced. Next prompt: how would you describe yourself before the quake? Next, what dreams did you have for yourself when you were younger? Were they realized? What or who did you dream of becoming? Next, what activities did you love as a child, as a teenager, before your life quake? And while you're still thinking of them, why did you stop doing them? Next, what activities have you always wanted to do but never tried? What held you back? And I'm going to add, that's not here, who, if anyone, held you back? Next, what are your hobbies, your interests? What brings you joy? Are you including these in your daily life? If not, how can you integrate them? Imagine yourself 3 years into the future. How would you like to see yourself? All of the areas of life: emotional, spiritual, physical, job, career, friends, relationships. Where would you like to live? How would you like to live? Next, What is one thing you can do today or this week that will bring you joy? And what memories of life before the lifequake bring you happiness? This next one is one of my favorites. What are you able to do today that you couldn't do before the lifequake? What strengths do you have now because of what you've been through? And our last one, who is in your corner? Friends, family, coworkers, clergy, therapist, coach? Who brings you joy? Who makes you laugh? One of the gifts I found in navigating grief is that while life will never be the same as it was before your lifequake, in some ways it's also freeing. This may be the perfect time to redefine yourself and decide who and what you want to be. You don't have to meet anyone else's ideas or expectations. Have fun, see what resonates. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure.
Well, I don't know about everyone else, but I definitely had to grab my Kleenex.
I
Oh,
almost did.
I saw that. Oh, good for you. What a wonderful story. I'm still kind of taking it all in. Those prompts are really good.
Thank you.
I can't wait to go back and watch the replay myself and do these exercises.
I find journaling to be one of the best exercises that, as long as we don't judge what we write, what comes out is what's really deep inside. And there's a trick, sort of, if you're having trouble writing and you just can't let your hand go with whatever's coming out, switch to your non-dominant hand,
Mhm.
and that makes a huge difference.
Yes, it does. I do that often too. I love that. Thank you.
You.
So, how did it feel reading the chapter just now to everyone?
Um, it was very different from how I was trained as a social worker. Um, in graduate school, and I'm going to say pretty much for anybody who is not a coach, but who is a therapist, a psychologist, a counselor, we're trained to not reveal our personal sides. And so this was completely the opposite. It's, going bare. It's here I am, and just putting myself out there and hoping that it helps somebody,
Oh, I
because
think
it's
the chapter will.
very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's truly a gift. Your chapter is truly a gift, especially the prompts. Yeah.
Thank you.
Wow. So I think again, I think you already spoke to it a little bit. But do you have anything else that you want to say or offer? Do you have anything that you are offering or gifting or
I do have a free gift, and it can be downloaded from my website, which is www.introspection.com. And introspection is INN, trospection.
cute?
And then at the end of it, it's a /free guide. So it's introspection.com/free guide. And
And
it's
that's going to be in the notes.
okay.
So people will be able to click on the YouTube notes below, get into the comments and whatnot, and in the description rather, and find your information. We're going to have all of that there for everyone. And if you want to go back on Facebook when we're finished, back to this post where the live stream is, you can go ahead and put all of your information in there. And be sure to visit Facebook anyway and respond to all of the comments and answer any of the questions that people might have. And I'm going to do the same. But if that's it, anything else?
I'm also going to let people know that if they feel that they're ready to start to move forward and look for a way to thrive in their new life, that I offer a free strategy or discovery call. And I will put the link for that also.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Amy. You
Thank
are
you.
awesome.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
And all of your information will be in the notes in the description and everything. And on Facebook on the post attached to this live stream, or the live stream that is this post, however we say that. But thank you so much, Amy, for joining us today and reading your chapter aloud. Your brave words are truly going to change the world.
Thank you.
My name is Lisa Karasek, and we'll see you next time, next Brave Story Time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.